Now let's pass it over to Heather with our first question about um, how have you seen the like recognition programs and how they're structured actually shift how employee in behavior and engagement actually like you once you actually put together that structured recognition program in place, how have you seen that shift how people engage with others, and also just like is there a behavioral change that occurs too, especially at your time at Petco?
Such a great question, Jason. So, in my experience, I've really seen that recognition, when it's timely, it's consistent, and it's tied back to company values and mission, has a really significant impact on just overall behaviors. And specifically, structured recognition programs have the ability to really shift in significant ways the behaviors of employees. And so it becomes something that's embedded in the culture, and leaders shift from just checking a box and saying, I'm going to go recognize so and so for an anniversary, to really looking for those moments that matter, looking for positive behaviors that they're seeing, and then recognizing in that time. So it goes beyond saying thank you to people, right? A simple thank you or sending a quick email can feel a little transactional. And it's really about understanding what's going to drive that behavioral change and then tying the recognition back to it. And as you do that, you'll start to see it become more embedded in the culture. So it shifts from being a leader or manager driven initiative to being something that's really going to be driven by all of the employees in the company. So peers will start to recognize peers, and you'll start to see this positive ripple effect that occurs. And so it's really kind of this awesome twofold thing that happens where recognition is driving positive behaviors, and those positive behaviors are also driving business results. And then it becomes this steamroll effect of recognition being a true behavioral and business driver.
Oh, I love that. That's fascinating. Now, Stacy, I want to get your thoughts on this too, and your experience at Domino's, see if there's any like similarities or differences, etc. But I'm also secretly very curious to see how Heather, in your role at Petco, in more on the employee engagement, milestone experience, and then Stacy in the internal communications front. I'm so curious and always have been curious about the parallels between that. So anyway, Stacy, I would love to get your feedback on that.
So I think it very much aligned with Heather's experience. Our program was designed similarly based on the values and the behaviors that we wanted to see and bringing them forward so that people could see them. And I think the most important thing about regular recognition is not only does it make the individuals who get recognized feel good and it makes them feel better about the place that they work, but it also creates a culture where you're looking to find people doing something right rather than having a culture that is looking for things that people are doing wrong. When you start to really find the good and the wins and celebrate those on a regular basis, it fills people up personally, but it also encourages the behaviors that you want to see, the actions that you want to see, the business, and tying it to your values and your mission and your purpose, to the work that you want people to work on to reach your goals.
Oh, I love that. And I think that'll actually tie in perfectly to the next question for Neil about, from a learning and development perspective specifically, where does recognition actually play a role there in helping people grow and helping them stay invested in their careers and themselves? And Neil, Chief Learning Officer, who better to ask than you, would love your thoughts on that.
Yeah, there's two things I would share. The first is a little bit philosophical, but in our most natural state as human beings, we are designed to grow and develop. And in fact, anything in nature, whether it's plants or animals, Heather, others, when they're in a healthy environment, will grow. That's the way that we're designed, right? So where growth is not happening, where people are not happening, there's typically something in the environment. My wife has thousands of plants. The ones that don't grow, there is something in the environment, the soil, something that is constraining that growth. And I think when we think about when do people grow and succeed in their careers, it's when that environment contains all of the right ingredients, the soil is the right pH balance, etc. And that's the shepherding as organizations that we do to create the environment. So learning is a big part of that, but so is appreciation and recognition, which leads me to the second thought here, which is holistic employee health is now becoming a core lever. It's moved from a perk to a part of the performance framework for organizations. And so, on the back of research done by Dr. Paul Conte at Deloitte, our talent value proposition is anchored on two generative human drives. The first is agency, and these drives are things that make us well as humans. We need these. These are what drive us to be happy, to be well. The first one is agency. So the ability to choose in whatever circumstances you're given. Sometimes it's A, B choice, but you still have choice. And the second is gratitude. And that this cycle of having agency and choice and being grateful for what you have and are given the opportunities for is what drives well-being in organizations, which drives performance. And I'm sure we'll talk about that as well. Gratitude and appreciation and recognition feed each other so much. Where leaders express gratitude in specificity for work that was done, outcomes that were achieved, actions that were done, that recognition feeds a very healthy workplace that people will grow in and contribute. So it's a huge part of creating that natural environment where people can grow in their own way and at their own speed.
Oh, wow. So what you just talked about, Neil, especially with the distinction between appreciation and recognition, I love that you kind of drew a line in the sand there. And I think that helps sort of expand on what Heather was saying about how it's not just saying thank you. There's so much more to it. And so, Heather, I would love your kind of thoughts on this as well.
Yeah. First off, Neil, loved everything that you had to say, like so impactful. When I think about this in particular, and I think about recognition and really recognizing or leaning into positive behavioral recognition, it's that psychological factor of when you're encouraging people to continue to do the positive things, right? And also based off of what Stacey shared as well, it becomes more habitual for them to do it, right? They want that positive recognition. They want that acknowledgement of the good work they're doing, which can have an inherent impact on that growth factor and that ability to continue to develop. And so this piece of things, recognition ties so much into learning and development because there's a natural growth that's going to happen through positive recognition and acknowledgement of the good work being done. And then I think the other piece of this is also the fact that for some people, having developmental opportunities is a way to recognize them, right? So them having the ability to develop, to grow, to work on special projects may be something that's meaningful recognition to them. And so there's also that piece that really has resonated with me when I think about learning and development.
I love that distinction, Heather. I love because you're so right. And on all the different panels we've had, like if there's one consistent message, it's the power, or two consistent messages. If the power of like a real, true sense of gratitude and appreciation in a way, though, this is the second part that feels so relevant to that person. Like we were having one discussion where like this person just loves Diet Coke, and receiving Diet Coke was the greatest thing that she's ever received at work. And it's because they knew how deeply she loves it, and it's so the same thing with like that educational part of it that you're talking about, Heather. if that's what they want, if they want to grow, and it's like, I see you and I want you to grow too. Oh my gosh, that's amazing stuff. So Stacy, and before I part of this question has a two-word a piece of it that makes me cringe a little bit, and it's post-pandemic. But I feel like I have to say it because I don't know if it's this year in particular, but I feel like I'm seeing and hearing and feeling more residual thoughts now from 5 years ago than I have, yeah, last year and the year before. It's kind of an interesting perspective. And so for you specifically, when you were at Domino's, I'm so curious with like appreciation, whether it be like peer person to person or from leadership. How did that like factor into your ability to attract, retain, keep people from leaving, um, especially during this time where we're no longer like what we were back then?
Yeah, yes. The world continues to change, and I think with every year we have evolved just a little bit more. For us, we've been able to have different recognition programs in place throughout the entire process, but we couldn't do some of the programs, specifically some of our large event-based recognitions and celebration and big awards. So then it's time to make sure that you're leaning in on the small stuff, but it's not the small stuff. That everyday on time recognition is the most important stuff. I love a big celebration and I love a big award, and we were able to finally do those over time. But by having programs in place where we could celebrate people in the in-betweens, that is important, especially when a lot of organizations are feeling this right now, right? There's anxiety, there's uncertainty, there are things that are outside of your control. But you can control how you treat your teams. You can find everyday wins. If there are a lot of things that don't feel like they're going right, you need to shift your mindset again to finding those things that are, because that's what's going to retain people. I think people are feeling like they're retaining people right now because there's not a lot of places for people to go. But with all of these, all of these economic waves that we get, the pendulum always swings back and forth. But there's something that is really powerful and long lasting on that on time, meaningful and thoughtful recognition. And it really does make a difference.
Oh, I love that. Heather, I would love to get your thoughts kind of like in response to everything that Stacy was just talking about.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with what Stacy shared. I will also just add in, there's a saying that I don't know if you all have heard it or not, but it's people don't leave companies, they leave managers. And so when I think about that, I really think about the power of recognition and appreciation and acknowledgement of work that's done and how that drives retention and the cultural initiatives, right? I think specifically as we have shifted away from the pandemic and we're in this post-pandemic atmosphere or environment, people are more cognizant or aware of culture. And so they ask that question. They want to know, what is the culture of the company I'm going to go work for? And that is a driving factor or driving force for people to make choices to either join a company or to stay or leave an organization. And so it is really important that recognition is embedded in that culture. To what, Stacy shared, it's got to be in the moment, timely, meaningful recognition. And that again becomes a part of just the framework of your company culture and is something that's just so natural of a behavior that people feel it, they know it. They can't always say what it is that makes the company or organization different, but they know it and they feel it. And it's something that then gets passed along or shared as you think about best place to work.
And I think what you both said really ties into, like, our human beings are smart, and we can smell a rat.
Mhm.
And there are lots of organizations that are inauthentic through those cycles. They ramp up recognition as the cycle goes down. And yes, that's a natural sort of piece. But if it's not in the DNA and it feels unnatural for certain leaders to start commoditizing it in a way of like doling it out only when they feel like it's going to serve them, as opposed to giving it as part of who they are, it really impacts the quality of that. And we talk about, for our leaders, you might think that what you doled out was $1 worth of recognition. It was received as 1 penny. So the deposits that you think you're making are in some cases even withdrawals if it's not done in a way that's authentic. And so sometimes giving inauthentic recognition because the sense that it's being done for a reason beyond what what recognition should be used for self purposes as opposed to helping and serving the one that they're giving it to, it's actually a negative. And not giving recognition, but taking for yourself. And so I think this is not I think people treat it like it's free and easy to give out, and we use it when we need to. We actually need to be very intentional and authentic about it and thoughtful. Those are the types of recognitions that really make deposits versus those that we've seen lots of organizations put recognition programs in, and culture goes down from a measurement perspective because it's a checkbox activity for leaders. They check, they've sent out recognition the number of times they've been asked, as opposed to doing what Stacy said, which is watching for really authentic. What you did here really made an impact. Here's how I would express that. Well done. Versus thanks for all your hard work. Thanks for all your hard work. Sense of like it means nothing. It's not a deposit. It's a withdrawal.
Whoa, yes. That was, if it's okay with everybody, I would love to just stay on this for just a moment because I think, Neil, you really tapped into something here that relates to everything. I won't put anybody on the spot, but I will say if anyone else would like to just kind of contribute to that, I would welcome it. My only contribution would be I will never forget my boss, Michael Levy, who founded this company. The reason I knew I wanted to work here was there was a moment when I was actually just a contract marketer for him, and he stopped and said, "Hey, can I say hi to your kids?" Because he saw them in the background. And he took 5, 10 minutes to just introduce himself, say, "Hi, I'm Michael. Met my daughter Evie and my daughter Josie." And I was like, that's the culture I want right there, you know? And I don't think anyone's ever done that before. Usually it's like, hello, whatever, like awkward. But he was like, no, I really want to know who they are. Like they're humans. So that was the moment that I was like, this is where I want to be. And that was a very special moment for me. I don't know, Heather or Stacy, if either of you want to contribute as well.
Oh, Stacy,
Go ahead.
okay.
I,
I have a similar moment to you, Jason, where I moved to a new leader actually here at Petco, and we were going through a particularly like stressful time of just projects and work that needed to be completed. And I get this, knock on my door and go down, and I've got a delivery, and I open it up and it's 6 pounds of Skittles. Well, I had jokingly made a comment that, they were my stress food. I had stress Skittles. So anytime I got stressed out, I'd grab a handful of Skittles out of my Skittle jar and eat them. And my boss, being just so thoughtful, had shipped me 6 pounds of Skittles that, as kind of an acknowledgement of like, I know we're in a particularly stressful moment. I see it, I know it, and I know that this is something that helps bring you joy. So those pieces of recognition, like the fact that your leader knows you at that level, is just so amazing and impactful and makes you very loyal.
hey, anytime people are delivering food, it makes things a little bit better. And I will say, I think it really is about being seen. I think people want to know that their work, everyone's working so hard. And you want to know that your work matters and that you're making an impact. And if someone can say that out loud, they can see you as an individual human, parent, Skittle lover, that you feel stress, that you feel emotion, that you're working hard, that you're doing something, and you're doing all of this for the business, right? And they are clear and specific about it. That means so much to people. And you're exactly right, Heather. It adds loyalty. It adds a feeling of connection to your brand. And companies should be thinking about these things proactively, not reactively, because you're really, if you can create that safe space, that culture, that engagement, that connection by just showing, and it doesn't take a lot, it just takes being a proactive and thoughtful person so that you are seeing your team in all of their differences.
Amazing. Um, I want to go to the next question, but I want to segue a little bit with one of the questions, or actually two of the questions I'm seeing here for Stacy. And I think I really am curious what Neil and Heather you think too after Stacy talks. But the question, as it is talking about a example where a message of or appreciation or kindness deeply resonated, not just with an individual, but across an entire organization. And I know you've had firsthand experience with this. Um, the segue, second part two of the question from the audience, though, is in your experience, especially in internal communications, I'm so curious, is there a way to respectfully call someone out and say, this, I see the facade, I see the checkbox, this isn't real. How do you address that in a way that my assumption is you want to help the organization say this is why it's not working? So that's like a big two-part question, and I'll leave it in your hands, Stacy.
So I want to start with the second part, the fake recognition first, because I think it happens a lot, and it's not necessarily malicious. It's not putting recognition on your to-do list, and it's getting to the end of the month and realizing that you've got points to give out, and 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 having your assistant send out 5 messages to 5 names that say thank you, and it's easy for people to do. It's something that you have to proactively put on your to-do list, and it's something that you have to teach. You have to teach people how to recognize. People do think that saying thank you is recognizing people. And it's something, but as Neil aptly pointed out, you might be doing the exact opposite of what you're trying to accomplish if you don't tie it back into the impact and the specific action that the person took. And it doesn't take that much longer, but it does mean that if you're rolling out recognition, if you're trying to build a culture of recognition, it can't just be about saying it's time to recognize. It's also a time to remind and support people on how to do it, and then having your top leaders demonstrate that in as public a way as possible to help reinforce that, and highlighting big wins. So for as an internal communicator, if I saw a well done recognition, I could amplify that potentially in some of our other channels to really show what great recognition looks like. We actually displayed our recognition on digital screens, and so people, you could see, you could see what great recognition looked like, and you could see what it didn't look like as well. So I think that that's important, and you know what you want to get as recognition as an individual, and that's the same thing that your team wants. And then in terms of the other part of the question on kindness, we at Domino's during the pandemic, we were open. Our stores were open, and one of the things that we did was a internal campaign called Feed the Need, because we wanted to drive purpose, recognition, and connection to the fact that we were open and feeding first responders, hospitals and team members. And so we were looking for the good, right? And we were celebrating when people were donating pizzas to their communities and bringing a little bit of brightness, just some hot shared restaurant food because it was special and unique during that time. So whatever you're doing, it's about finding a way to promote the behaviors and the things you'd like to see and celebrate the things that connect people to the brand.
I think I love the question, by the way. So thank you for submitting that of how do you help leaders? Because it's one thing to set the bar; it's another thing to help people get to it. Um, I'm a optimist at heart, and so I believe in giving people the benefit of the doubt. And I'm by leaders, I mean so when we talk about this inauthentic piece, it's often uh, they're unaware of the impact of what they've done. So the gift that you give them is holding up the mirror so they can see and feel what actually is the result. And it's rarely the intended result, right? And sometimes I think we do a disservice to leaders that they don't see that instant sort of feedback and whatnot. One of the best recognitions for leaders, I believe, is a recognition of how hard the job is. All the various things you're being asked to do, of which giving recognition is one. And if you don't nail it every time, I think recognizing the fact that it's hard and acknowledging that you're allowed to flub one or two, and then to Stacy's point, helping. Here's what great looks like. Here's where it missed a bit. Is a gift, and so if giving recognition is seen as a gift, and it's a one that you wrap very carefully, as opposed to throwing in front of, then it's really powerful. I'll share I'm just gonna, if you don't mind, I'm gonna take my shoe off. My boss knows I have a shoe fetish. So at the end of the year, I wore so many different shoes to various different things. And so he bought me a pair of Nikes and personalized them with my name, my initials. Every time I wear these shoes, I think of him. I think of the year that I had, and it motivates me to really dig in and do a little bit more. So it's a pair of shoes. It's not Skittles, but for me, it's lasted like the spillover effect of that has been years, not even getting me through the next quarter. It's impacted me for years. And so that's because it was a very thoughtful, what he delivered it with in terms of the why, all of those things had a huge impact on me. And so um, I think leaders try hard. We don't always get it right. Acknowledging that, if they keep perpetually doing, then um, we need to have remedial interventions. In some cases, because they're doing more damage than good. They're destroying culture. But for the most part, it's a skill and will identification of, is it because they don't want to or they don't know how to, and come alongside to help as opposed to punish.
Neil, first off, you and I should connect after this to talk about shoes because I also have a lot of shoes, a lot of Nikes in my closet. But one of the things that you said that really resonated is recognition is a gift. And I am one of those people who also says feedback is a gift. And so to answer that second part of the question, right? And even to go back earlier in our conversation, when we talk about growth and development, the only way that we can grow and develop is through feedback. And so oftentimes, as Neil and Stacy both touched on, it's not intended to be inauthentic recognition. It just may be a skill set issue. And simply having a conversation with that individual and saying, hey, I really appreciate the fact that you said thank you to me or that you recognized me for this. But I wanted to share with you that sometimes it feels a little authentic. And here's the reason why. And here's how I like to be recognized, or here's how you could recognize me differently to where it's more meaningful, could really help that leader shift or change how they're showing up, right? And so, for me, I think about that. I think about that even as I approach my leadership style and making sure that, I understand what meaningful recognition looks like to each of my individual employees, because we are all human first and we're all very different.
Oh, I love that. And it's there's so much to everything that all three of you were just kind of contributing towards. And it's like I I I have yet to meet a leader in any position that didn't, even if like was a little resistant at first, didn't appreciate the feedback, whether it's positive, negative, constructive, whatever it may be. The true leaders I have worked with always are like, I'm going to digest this and figure out what to do with this information. And that's where the powerful stuff really comes into play.
I have
Neil,
met
oh,
leaders
sorry,
who don't.
please.
I have met leaders who don't. So I think the key there, as you said, true leaders, like that's true. But I think
Solid.
there's lots of managers who don't
Mm.
know what to do with that and have bad actors in the result.
Fair point. Very fair point. Um,
Unfortunately.
I was just trying to make sure I didn't get in trouble if people were looking at my LinkedIn profile.
No.
No, that's great. So actually, Neil, while I have you, so we're talking a lot about like the emotional aspect of recognition, right? It feels good, right? And it's I think it was Stacy and Heather like talking about catching people doing things that are kind, and that is like such a wonderful thing. But we all work for businesses, and at the end of the day, even though it may feel a little commoditized or it may feel like this is a system now, um, there is something in it though that very clearly showcases the the financial benefit of being seen, being heard. And it's not just about churn, it's not just about staying on. There's more to it. And Neil, I think you're perfect to answer this question about, where are you seeing the ROI really take life in such initiatives?
I think that's the question that most leadership teams are. Before you're able to launch any new program, you're going to have some line of sight too. So what's in it for the business? We get what's in it for people, for our people. And some leadership teams will do the math on their own. If it's good for our people, it's good for our business. But sometimes you need to spell it out. Uh, Two things I would say. One is you may be familiar with the framework of our experiences shape our beliefs shape our actions shape our results. Most leadership teams spend most of their time talking about results and actions. But truly, what gets at the foundation of how we get results is down to the experiences that our people are having and how that shapes their belief about when you join an organization, you're the most engaged, most or people are the most engaged they ever are at the beginning. And then they meet their boss, and then they meet their peers, and their engagement slips a little bit. And it's a discretionary effort that people have. It's not an on-off switch, it's a dimmer switch where you can turn up the light or turn it down a bit. And the power of unlocking discretionary effort in the existing workforce that you have could save you the need to recruit another 10, 15, 20 people if the effort was applied. So that's one way of looking at it. And if recognition isn't directly tied to better quality, lower risk, and ultimately revenue, it won't resonate with the CFO, for example, as nice a human as they are. But better quality and lower risk are the direct contributor of recognition because your people put in that little bit extra to get the quality right and to make sure they've mitigated the risk because that's what they'll get recognized for. Those are key drivers in any business framework for value proposition going forward, and obviously revenue. So I think ultimately it also recognition connects people to a bigger, if you can use it to connect them to a bigger part of the strategy, that their contribution, so they see purpose in the work that they're doing, results that are connected to your organization's purpose, and they will feel that, and it's a virtuous circle up as opposed to circling the drain. To Heather's point, that many times your relationship with your manager is a drain circling exercise till they finally just fall out the bottom end of it, right? It creates an uplift in the entire organization, and all your metrics lift. It's all about correlation, not causation, though. Can I directly say that recognition you gave drove this person's engagement up 4%? No, that's naive. But the cumulative impact of it, how they're more connected to purpose, how they've unlocked more discretionary effort, they take a little bit extra time to get it right, and they make sure that they've covered off their risk. These are very positive business outcomes that we see recognition being directly tied to.
Oh, I love that. And I'm going to ask Heather to follow up after a second. Neil, you just reminded me of a panel we had last month where it was the Wayne County Airport Authority, where a lot of their staff are, they can get time and a half if they're working overtime. And by focusing on a recognition program, actually their whole idea was catching people being kind. So when the managers and leaders were walking out, instead of being like, "Hey, what are you doing, Neil?" It was instead like, "Hey, great job, Neil." And it completely shifted the whole culture. But the most amazing outcome was they saw a 10% increase in overall productivity and a 10% decrease in the amount of financial, like in terms of how much they were spending on overtime as a result. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. Okay, I had to share that because it just reminded me of that. Heather, you're up.
Yeah. So earlier, I made the comment that recognition isn't just about saying thank you. So when recognition is tied directly to the right behaviors, you're going to see those behaviors be exemplified across more and more employees, right? And you're going to see people start to live those brand values or drive customer engagement or operational excellence because they're getting recognized for specific business driving things. And that really connects to the bigger picture, like Neil said, right? And so that clarity in how you're recognizing people and making it meaningful and tying it back to business drivers is what's going to drive motivation and accountability as well and connect them to the greater purpose. So better business outcomes are aligned to behaviors. Behaviors become aligned to recognition, and recognition becomes just a culture of appreciation. And so there's this ripple effect, right? That's going to happen, this steamroll effect. And when I think about it even more tactically, like in my environment where we're a retail organization, happier people are going to create happier experiences. And so when people are excited to come to work, they have a good culture, they feel connected to the business and the strategy, they are going to show up better for the customers that they're engaging with. And that's going to have a business driving result, right? To Neil's point, you may not be able to really quantify what that is, but you know it and you feel it and you can see it long term. And of course, there's those other pieces too of like you reduce turnover. So your, recruiting costs aren't as high. You have better quality employees because they've been with you longer. You don't have the onboarding costs that are associated with things. But again, these are really, hard to quantify metrics. And so it's about being able to find ways to really tie it back to just organizationally, how are we aligning behaviors through positive recognition?
Absolutely. Stacy, I would love for you to touch on that too. And then if it's possible, maybe you and Neil would like to just chat a little bit about, there was a question that came in about how does being a kind leader versus always nice play out regarding how you provide recognition. I thought that was kind of an interesting segue with this topic specifically.
Yeah, I put my answer in the thing there, but I clear is kind, nice may or may not do the hard conversation, which kindness would be. The kindest thing you can do sometimes is give difficult feedback. I think that's the distinction I always make.
I, I think that's spot on, Neil. The idea of feedback, as Heather said, is a gift, but also I like to look at it as feedback is an opportunity for you as a leader to teach and grow someone. So if you are skipping the feedback, you're not being kind to yourself and you're not being kind to your team member because you're stealing something from them. You're stealing from them a lesson. And I think that the more you create that culture, it's the same thing. The feedback, the positive feedback and the constructive feedback should be a culture shift that's constant and on time. And it doesn't become such a heavy lift if you're always doing it. It becomes just a part of who you are. You'll watch your team grow. They'll feel appreciated when they do something right. They'll learn something when there's an opportunity for them to learn. And it can be very contagious and a really positive in a really positive way for you and your brand.
Oh, I love that. Um, oh, I love all this so much. I just wish we were talking for another 17 hours. That's all. Stacy, you actually said before that I think it was when we first met, something along the lines of like storytelling being the heartbeat of internal comms. And I kind of really loved that. And it's so much that I made sure to add it to the questions for today. And I would love for your kind of perception of that to talk about like where can stories or how can stories of appreciation, when they're amplified, help reinforce a culture of pride and kindness and things of that nature?
Well, at Domino's, there's definitely a culture of celebrating wins and telling stories. And I had an amazing team of storytellers that I had an opportunity to work with as well. And one of the fun things that we got a chance to do was tell the stories when people were winning and giving awards. And they'd actually get a little documentary of their life. And I'll tell you, this storytelling, this reward, this recognition was such a powerful motivator, and it allowed people to see the whole person because we always included something about their personal life in the storytelling, not just their work life, but also really specifically demonstrating exactly what we're talking about today, how to give recognition by tying it really closely back into the impact that this individual's actions had for the brand. And sometimes it was a very specific project that the person worked on. And sometimes it was someone who just was a giver or was incredibly kind, who just had a positive impact on people that they met. And we try to reinforce that with people who had just joined the organization or had been there their whole life. So that was one way, that a really fun, big way to do that storytelling. But we could also do that in smaller things. It could be an article, it could be a clip, it could be, again, all we are doing is amplifying the recognition should be a part of your culture every day, that your leaders are giving every single day. And it's a fun way to find and tell stories that really help support your culture.
I've had the luxury of being able to spend quite a bit of time recently here in Canada with some of our Indigenous elders. And the reason I'm doing so is because they've had an amazing ability to pass wisdom from generation to generation, in spite of all of the pressure and, frankly, racism and everything else that's happened to our Indigenous people in Canada in particular. And when I asked them, how have you done that? There's two things. One, though, that really stands out for me, and I use it from a learning perspective, but it's also very applicable here, is the power. First of all, they think in terms of 7 generations. The decisions that they're making and the way they look at making decisions, they think 7 generations, not quarter by quarter, not annual profit by annual profit, but 7 generations from now. How might this impact those that I'm in the care of? That's a powerful concept and very difficult for us. It blows my mind. I can't think about what the world will be like in 18 months, given what's going on with AI, et cetera. But the second thing is that when they pick their successor for an elder in a tribe, they will spend probably years at the side of that elder listening to the story. It's storytelling after storytelling. The elders pass on the stories of what makes this tribe so powerful, how it's connected to the land, etc. And they're calling out the recognition of things that have happened in this tribe, people that made it possible for this tribe to be where it is. They're telling these stories over and over and over to the point where the successor feels like they're their stories now. They've heard the same story 500 times and it becomes part of who they are. And when, as a leader, they are now using the same stories to pass on and adding their own going forward. I think in the succession of leadership, telling stories about recognizing within your context, your industry, your business, where great things have happened, where people have made impacts that matter, small and big, that storytelling is how the culture of your organization evolves over time. Deloitte is 181 years old this year. And the stories that we hear about William Deloitte back in 18, whatever year it was, 1860, I think something, still live on. They're still being told. And of leaders who, when I joined the firm, who were the CEO of Deloitte at the time, stories about what they did that made it possible for us to be where we are today. And that legacy of storytelling, recognizing the contributions, is a foundational part of, I think, the longevity of an organization. If you can't find those stories that inspire people to contribute and be part of something bigger than themselves, then you've failed, I think, as an executive team in particular. So storytelling gets, and how it's used in recognition gets so undervalued in how we develop the kinds of organizations that the world would be proud of. And I spent some time a few months ago with Simon Sinek, who told a story about when he wrote his book, Start With Why. He went on a book tour, and the concepts in there are like mind-blowing about it, the importance of why. And at the end of his talk, he opened it up for questions, and a CEO put his hand up. It was CEOs, CHROs, CFOs in the audience, put his hand up and said, Simon, how many, have you ever led an organization more than 4,000 people? No. Have you ever led an organization that had a revenue of larger than $1 billion? No. And he went on with these questions, right? And Simon said, no, no, no. And the CEO said, well, I guess that's true because these ideas are so naive and impractical. I could never use them. And Simon was like in a room where he was trying to launch these, right? But what he did next is so instructive for us because he said, don't use them then. Next question. And he said, I was not compelled to convince people that they needed to take on these ideas. It's an invitation. And if you choose not to take up the invitation, that's fine. You're not ready for it. Your organization's not ready. That's fine. I think that's true with this concept as well. Tell the stories. Not everybody, it's not going to resonate with anyone. Your job is not to convince people that what somebody did was amazing. It's an invitation to hear out and participate in something that's bigger than yourself. And it releases you from the need to be right, or in some cases you give great recognition and they don't pick up what you're putting down. You don't have to convince them. It's an invitation. You do your part, participate, and be honest with yourself, and then move on. And no harm, no foul.
That's all fantastic. I think the other piece of storytelling and recognition too is that when you are able to share real life recognition and amplify that across corporate channels, externally and internally, employees start to see themselves in the culture. So it takes it from being this philosophical thing that we talk about that's not really real or tangible to being something that they actually can feel and see themselves in. And so it creates that direct connection and threads that needle through so that they understand that the work that they do is really impactful to the business and, continues the momentum with others.
Amazing. This session has been fantastic. And as expected, there's only a few minutes remaining. And I want to give all three of you an opportunity to say just, one more thing. And I'll leave it with, to all the folks that are listening and all the folks that are going to listen later, if you had to share just one thing that they could do today to help influence what we've talked about so far today, I would love to get your thoughts on what that could possibly be, or just use an example of what you've seen work in the past. And I'll start with Stacy.
I think that if you can only do one thing, you should and must model exactly what we're talking about. Clear, specific, quick recognition. And the higher you are in the organization, or the more influence you have on leaders to do the same, the more you can start to create that culture. It is a practice, and it's not easy at first, but once you do it, it makes all the difference.
Absolutely. Neil.
I would say hit them in the feels. Into there, you can communicate intellectually that hits the head, but real impact for recognition doesn't happen until it drops a foot into the heart. So, which means you have to feel like, try to spend a little bit of time, if you're giving recognition, articulating how it made you feel. Even it's a conversation about what it engendered from an impact and feeling perspective, not just the intellectual dollars and cents piece. So, I mean, a thank you for selling that work that was $1 million. Okay. But if you can really translate that into something that hits, like, that is going to change the way healthcare is done, or the way that, et cetera. That's where the real impact of recognition happens. So aim for the heart, not for the head.
I love that. Heather.
Yeah, I would say one thing I would challenge everyone to do today or walk away with is find a way to recognize somebody for the work that they do day to day. So not the superstars, not the person that's doing a special project, but find a way to give meaningful recognition to somebody in their day-to-day work and how that's making an impact to the business, and practice that.
Absolutely. Neil, Heather, Stacy, thank you so much for this incredible conversation. I quite literally have goosebumps from this conversation. It was amazing. Thank you so much. For all of you, that there are a few questions that we weren't able to get to, we will follow up to make sure, and I'll share it with Neil, Heather, and Stacy in case they wanted to provide some feedback. But again, Neil, Heather, Stacy, thank you so much for your time. This has been remarkable. I really appreciate all three of you.
Thanks, Jason.
Pleasure.
Yeah.
Good luck recognizing.
Bye, everyone.